So we're just doing Jurassic Park now. Let's talk about it. A biotech company has just claimed to have de-extincted the direwolf using DNA editing technology, but did they actually? In order to truly bring an animal back from extinction, you need to use ancient DNA samples in order to reconstruct their entire genome, which is just a fancy word for all the DNA inside each of their cells. You then take an egg cell from a closely related living animal, remove its DNA, replace it with the reconstructed DNA from the extinct animal, and then implant it into a viable host womb. The animal born as a result should be genetically indistinguishable from a member of an extinct species, i.e., a perfect clone. The problem is that 10,000-year-old DNA is very difficult to work with. Most of the time, it's basically crumbs. So what these scientists did instead was take fresh DNA from living modern-day wolves, use the DNA editing technology CRISPR-Cas9 to tweak around 14 of their genes in order to give them physical traits that dire wolves would have had. They figured out which genes they needed to tweak by comparing that 10,000-year-old direwolf DNA with the DNA of modern-day wolves to figure out what genetically the direwolves had that modern-day wolves didn't. So in theory, if you compared 10,000-year-old direwolf DNA to the DNA of these puppies that were just born, they should be genetically indistinguishable. But again, 10,000-year-old DNA is famously difficult to get any good information out of, so this methodology might be a little bit shaky. These are not dire wolves per se. They are gray wolves that have been genetically engineered to closely match our best estimate of a dire wolf. And depending on your definition of de-extinct, this isn't even the closest we've ever come. In 2009, before a lot of y'all were probably even born, a perfect genetic clone of an extinct species of ibex was born in Spain. To be fair, that species of ibex only went extinct in the year 2000, and scientists were able to save some of its cells in liquid nitrogen, which means that the DNA samples they had access to had held up a lot better than 10,000-year-old fossilized DNA. Also, the ibex did die a couple days after it was born due to some defects in its lungs that are frequently seen in attempts to clone animals. So, to be fair to the direwolves, they seem to be holding up a lot better so far. Now, I want to emphasize that what these scientists did was extremely impressive, and also just really cool. As someone who's trying to find new ways to use CRISPR-Cas9 to treat human disease, any steps that we make towards safe and effective DNA editing in living creatures is a huge win in my book. But whether or not these guys can actually be called true direwolves opens up some really interesting philosophical questions about DNA and genetics. Let me know in the comments what you think. Are these truly direwolves, or are they just gray wolves that have had some of their genes tweaked?